Hello everyone. Welcome to the Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and today we are going over part 16 in our Bermuda Triangle deep dive series. So the last time we were here, we were covering chapter 2, the Riddle of Missing Planes. And the time before that, we were also covering Chapter 2. So today, we're planning on finishing that chapter. We got about 7 pages for that. And we do have pictures in the book here. Of a collection of missing planes, some of their pilots, and missing ships, but next chapter is missing ships. So I think what we're going to do is finish chapter 2, and after that, we will look at these pictures that are in the book. And I will read all the captions underneath the pictures here. And other than that, I think we are going to have a great show. So thank you all for being here. Last show we had a bunch of different missing planes. These are those same planes in the slideshow next to us. We might switch it up halfway through. We'll go back to looking at the Illuminati photographs. But I think we are doing well here for today. And I hope you're all doing well. So, make sure to leave a like. Turn your bell notifications on. If you're new to the channel, thank you for being here. We always try to make this stream a little bit interesting. We do all of this live and in person. So I really appreciate all the support you guys give me. Okay. So as I said, we're on chapter 2. And this is the Riddle of Missing Planes. So this doesn't mean we're going to finish everything on missing planes. It's going to come back up in this book, obviously. But this is just going over the most prolific disappearances. And as we move into the book, we get more into the fine details of everything. So what I think I'm going to do is reread one paragraph from last show, just to get us caught up again. Because I treat these as individual videos, even though they're part of the long series that I'm doing here. But just so, in case you're watching weekly, just like I'm producing these, you won't be too lost as we jump in again. And for those reading along, if you do have the book at home, it is page 42 on Into the Bermuda Triangle by Gian J. Quasar. So let's begin, shall we? Not only have aircraft disappeared within sight of land, abruptly halting any radio dialogue, But even more strange, on a couple of occasions, radio messages from vanished planes have continued to be picked up by far-flung receiving stations hours afterward. This element to the mystery, as if to imply the messages were being received as they receded farther away in time or space, is echoed in the following cases. The most extraordinary example is that of a beach bear in '58 that left St. Thomas and headed for Miami, February 11th, 1980. The pilot was a young Civil Air Patrol student, last seen boarding his plane in his uniform, named Peter Jensen. Jensen last reported himself near Miami at 8:38 a.m., 4 hours and 23 minutes after takeoff. He said he was only 6.5 miles east of Miami. Both engines had quit and he was about to ditch. What is extraordinary, however, is that this was overheard by Fleming Flight 667 while in the vicinity of Bermuda, roughly 1,000 miles away. But it was not heard by Miami. So do you realize what's happening here? He said he was only 6.5 miles east of Miami. But a Fleming Flight 667 that was 1,000 miles away, roughly, heard his signals, but Miami did not. Very strange. Jensen's last words would seem to preclude further contact. Yet, at 8:53 a.m., 2 more flights picked up his maydays. They were American Flight 667 and Eastern Flight 924, both, like the Fleming flight, around Bermuda. Jensen now reported himself at 150 feet altitude. Descending to ditch, but he was now completely disoriented in strange clouds. Hey Zen, good to see you in the chat. By the way, Zen, I did talk with Brenda today, so anything you're being relayed is fairly up to date. So Jensen was in his craft at 150 feet altitude, descending to ditch, but he was now completely disoriented by strange clouds. Any idea what the clouds could be? The weather off Miami at the time was ideal, confirmed by an immediate Coast Guard helicopter search. So there was no fog or any storms rolling into the vicinity. He just got enveloped by clouds that stopped his vision here. And the signal was being picked up 1,000 miles away, but not 6.5 miles away at Miami. Tell me how that makes any sense. Hey Texas Learning, good to see you. This says, not once did Miami pick him up. What's going on here? 6.5 miles away, Miami didn't pick up a signal at all from this mayday. Their search was completely fruitless, including the inability to pick up an ELT signal. Was it a disoriented novice pilot who was lost and far off course? Is that all there is to it? I don't think so. If that is the case, then how can one explain the odd incident that night? Oh, we're talking about another incident. The tower on Caicos Island, about midway between San Juan and Miami, 600 miles away, picked up a radio message at 8:05 p.m. They distinctly heard the call letters N9027Q, the tail mark registration number of Jensen's plane. They described it as, quote, a young man's voice. He reported that he was 10 minutes away and wanted permission to land. Although the tower waited, no aircraft ever arrived. An intense search also failed to locate a trace here as well. Subsequent investigation established beyond a shadow of a doubt that the plane only had 5 hours of fuel on board. Yet 16 hours after takeoff, Jensen was picked up as still flying. This placed him 600 miles away from where he last reported himself and over 1,000 miles from where he was last heard by the airliners. And 11 hours after it was even possible. So you get that? He had only 5 hours of fuel on board. And 11 hours after it was even possible to even hear him if he was still up in the air, which he wouldn't be, he was heard over the radios. In developing the ramifications of all of this, it is pertinent to note that there is no place where an aircraft could land and refuel without being logged in and out. Jensen was not initiating his own disappearance, and it was not being reported on the news so that some crank would try and imitate Jensen and think to do so 600 miles out to sea by an isolated island. It's all pertinent information here. In later incidents, we will see how, quote, electronic fogs, end quote, have precipitated unusual events, as described by those who survived them. Some of them seemingly implying aberrations of time and space. Some might also propose that Jensen was suspended in a, quote, holding area, end quote, or, quote, limbo, end quote, where the fuel was not used before he was released or escaped. This gets more bizarre as we carry on here. This last suggestion, intimating direct intervention of the flight by alien or other intelligences, has also been suggested to explain other cases. Although this may sound somewhat like an erudite view, only a few months later, a plane disappeared in circumstances that add an alarming dimension to this supposition. It was a clear summer evening on June 28th, 1980. Jose Maldonado Torres was flying with his friend Jose Pagan to Puerto Rico in an Air Coupe 4-15D N3808H. At 8:03 p.m., the Remote Communications Air-to-Ground, or RCAG, log records the following transcript. Or the log records the following transcript. Quote, Mayday, Mayday. Aircoup Echo 0800 Hotel. We can see a strange object in our course. We are lost. Mayday, Mayday. And in brackets it says 25 seconds later. Mayday, Mayday. We are lost. We found a strange object in our course. I'll reread this here. One more time. The log records the following transcript. Quote, Mayday, Mayday. Aircoup 800 Hotel. We see a strange object in our course. We are lost. Mayday, Mayday. And then 25 seconds pass by. Mayday, Mayday. We are lost. We found a strange object in our course. End quote. Iberia Flight 976 flying north of San Juan intercepted the message and replied. Station calling 1215 Mayday, Mayday. Iberia 976, go ahead. And this is the aircoup that's lost. We are going from Santo Domingo to San Juan International, but we found a weird object in our course that made us change course about 3 different times. We got it right now in front of us at 1 o'clock. Our heading is 070 degrees. Our altitude is 1,600 at 070 degrees. Our VORs got lost off frequency. And Iberia Flight 976, the one that is responding to them being lost, says, Station calling 1215 Mayday, Mayday. Iberia 976, go ahead. And the lost aircoup responds, Mayday, Mayday. This is aircoup 3808 Hotel in flight from Santo Domingo to San Juan, Puerto Rico. We have a very weird object in front of us that made us lose our course. Our present heading is 130 degrees at 1,500 feet, sir. We lost signal off of Aguadilla VOR. I'm going to mispronounce some of these words. I'm sorry. I'm reading thousands of words here. We lost signal off of Aguadilla VOR. So that's the end of that transcript there. Torres's last message came in at 8 hours, 5 minutes, 45 seconds. Quote, right now, we supposed to be about 35 miles from the coast of Puerto Rico, but we have something weird in front of us that make us lose our course all the time. I changed our course a second, and then there's unintelligible in brackets. Our present heading, roughly now, is 300. We are right again in the same stuff, sir. End quote. At 8:07 p.m., N3808H vanished from Atlantic Fleet Weapons Range radar scope while 35 miles out to sea. At 8:15 p.m., in startling similarity to other aircraft disappearances, an object appeared on the scope, this time tracking 266 degrees. It was never identified and answered. No calls. And if it was the aircoup mysteriously reappearing, Torres sent no more maydays. It then permanently vanished. Hey, Woo Riders. Good to see you. I appreciate the kind comments. Alright, so we're having an incident here we're reading about. Where this aircoupe plane disappeared, reappeared, and then disappeared for good while in flight. And when it did reappear, the pilot Torres sent no more maydays. It then permanently vanished. The aircoupe also carried an ELT, yet no signal was received. And I believe the ELT is that black box transmitter. So even though those are supposed to be a failsafe, those disappear as well in these cases. Woo Riders, you make a good point. Woo Rider says, probably going through portals, the time and alignment probably has to be just right. Or it's NHI. I don't know what NHI is. But yeah, these planes are disappearing, reappearing. Then when they reappear, they're not maydaying anymore, which is really bizarre. Could that mean that the pilots are no longer on these planes? Because we've had these accounts before here where they found planes that have nobody in them after a while. Like they reappear, but there's nobody inside. So are the pilots disappearing with that initial disappearance? And the only thing reappearing are the planes themselves? And they're just kind of in autopilot? And then they disappear for good after that? And unfortunately, a lot of this we may never find out. Unless more of this happens, which we really don't want it to, but it seems like it's going to carry on. Alright, let's continue here. The search for this aircraft was quick and thorough, rippling outward from the precise location where it vanished from the radar scope. One search pilot who was obsessively diligent was Jose Pagan Jimenez, Pagan's father and the owner of the airplane. He was also a lieutenant in Puerto Rico's Aero Police. He flew many missions looking for his son, including the last one in his own helicopter, before search operations were suspended with negative results. Alright, we're moving on. Oh, there's a little more information here. On July 18th, 1880, Lieutenant Commander M.R. Adams issued what might be considered the official opinion of the Coast Guard in a, quote, "to whom it may concern," unquote, letter addressed to investigating bureaus in Washington. He observed, quote, "As of this date, nothing has ever been found to indicate positively the ultimate fate of N3808H. The Coast Guard has suspended active search, and barring the development of some new positive information indicating the whereabouts of the airplane and or its crew, no new search efforts will be undertaken." End quote. Inexplicably, aircraft have been found ditched and abandoned. Salvor Graham Hawks found one such plane by accident between Miami and Bimini at the bottom of the deep Florida Straits. By pure chance, his underwater cameras came across a piper sitting peacefully in the bottom mud. The remote camera zoomed in on its interior to reveal a surprising sight. The ignition key had been removed, yet the doors were tightly closed. There were no signs of personal effects inside. Hawks, also on the camera in the control room on the search vessel, commented with understandable surprise, quote, "Come on, you don't ditch a plane and then remove the ignition key," end quote. A Piper Apache is reported to have been found in the same circumstances. On May 4th, 1997, it was reported overdue. Despite the search, the plane was not found. Then on June 7th, 1997, it was discovered just 5 miles south of Bimini in only 7 to 8 feet of water, as though it had been dropped there only recently. There is no explanation for why the aircraft was never seen for a whole month in such shallow water. Well, I might have an explanation. You know what this sounds like to me? You have these disappearing planes ending up over 1,000 miles away in the air. We're talking about latitudes, but I think we are forgetting about the longitudes of this as well. Some of these planes might be reappearing inside the ocean with nobody piloting them anymore. Alright, I'll back up a little bit here. Then on June 7th, 1997, it was discovered just about 5 miles south of Bimini in only 7 to 8 feet of water, as though it had been dropped there only recently. Again, the term dropped is relevant. It's a relative term. I want to say it appeared in the water. Now, whether or not it was still in motion, that's another story. It could have been in motion when it appeared underwater and it just slowly glided to a stop on the ocean bed. But 7 to 8 feet of water makes me think it just popped up and appeared. There's no explanation for why the aircraft was never seen for a whole month in such shallow water. Well, one of the explanations could be that it was gone for an entire month. To us, a month passed. But to the pilot and the plane, the pilot probably got disappeared with the first disappearance. Then you have it reappear in the sky, and then it disappears again for good. But then some of these are being found underwater. I'm saying if it appeared a third time after disappearing twice, that third reappearance could be in the water itself. Which, with all the water tension, it would slow the plane down and make it come to a complete stop. Wouldn't matter that it's 7 to 8 feet in water. If nobody's seen or heard this, then that's a viable explanation. It didn't enter the water from above. It simply apparated. Its pilot is declared dead, but no final report has ever been issued, and few details exist. The time and radio discrepancies are unavoidable when examining the case of the disappearance of a Beechcraft Bonanza N5805C on January 6, 1981. The plane, with 4 persons, was headed from Opa-locka, near Miami, to Nassau with an ETA of 11:21 a.m. And at 11:41 a.m., the Bonanza was just technically overdue. However, 100 miles southeast of Nassau, near Georgetown, Great Exuma, where the plane could not possibly have been yet, a pilot picked up a mayday indicating the Bonanza was having some kind of a problem and had to ditch. All stations were alerted, but none, including Nassau, had heard the SOS. The pilot climbed higher and tried to regain contact with the Bonanza without success. Several hours later, 30 minutes after fuel exhaustion, around 3 p.m., the messages once again revived. The tower on Norman's Cay, one of the Exuma chain of islands, but much farther north and closer to Nassau, reported a garbled SOS from the Bonanza. In another eerie postscript, the pilot of N2712L reported that at 5 p.m., he too heard a mayday from the Bonanza, receiving clearly the call letters and the description. This was over an hour and a half after fuel exhaustion. Yet again, the problem could not be discerned. A bizarre chain of events not only preceded, but also followed the disappearance of Flight 201, a twin-engine Cessna 402B charter aircraft flying between Miami and Bimini on March 31st, 1984. For this trip, it carried 6 people, all employees of the charter company. The pilot was Chuck Soren, co-pilot Al Wharton, and extra co-pilot Gerald Lancaster. The others aboard were Anne Latarte, Tammy Christie, and Glynis Bernhard. The aircraft was tracked on radar, with nothing unusual observed. Then, not even midway to its destination, the target slowed to a dangerously low airspeed of a mere 90 knots. They continued like this for an estimated 4 minutes, without any indication from the pilots that something was wrong. The plane then, quote, plummeted in a 5,400 foot per minute dive until it vanished from radar, end quote. A clue to the fate of Flight 201 only deepened the mystery. An eyewitness at Bimini reported seeing a plane plunge into the sea about 1 mile off the northeast corner of the island. Further corroboration came from a man who said he saw, as well, a huge splash in the ocean, though he saw no plane. What is going on? They both pegged it between 7:30 and between 8:30 and 9 a.m. Although this is during the flight time of the aircraft, all the information points to the airplane disappearing at least 30 miles away from Bimini. If one supposes that the quote ghost aircraft, end quote, that crashed was Flight 201, then it never reappeared on radar, and there has been no SOS in the interim. The incident was completed with another mystery. The water in this area is only about 18 feet deep, yet a search uncovered no wreckage and no trace of the plane on the bottom. So now we're talking about just the water splashing, like these planes are now cloaked before they're... It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Ugh. Aircraft disappearances over the succeeding years have been on both long and short routes and have included a twin Cessna Skymaster carrying 4 persons which vanished off the coast of Florida, specifically on the East Coast, after a routine radio position report on January 14th, 1985. A Cessna T210K disappeared on a long flight from Miami to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, the following May 8th. A Piper disappeared between Nassau and Opa-locka on July 12, 1985, with 4 people aboard. On August 3rd, 1985, a pilot in his Cessna 172 disappeared, apparently near Fort Myers, Florida. And on September 8th, 1985, a Cherokee disappeared about 20 miles northeast of Key West after a routine radio communication at 10:08 p.m. that night. But of all these, the disappearance of another charter Piper Chieftain testifies in a vivid way to the unexplained. Here we go. Its flight route was short, very short, only 100 miles between Miami and its destination of West End, Grand Bahama Island. It was carrying 6 people, including its pilot, Jose Villa, in absolutely perfect weather on March 26th, 1986. Villa's last message stated he was 10 miles from West End. In terms of their ETA, about 5 to 7 minutes. Nothing was ever heard from him again. There was no SOS, no ELT, no wreckage, and no witnesses. This last fact is especially surprising since West End is a customs port of entry into the Bahamas, and the waterway below is often speckled with approaching boats. None reported any whine or sputtering overhead, or any crash into the sea. This is just another example of a lightning-like disappearance where a plane seems to, quote, dematerialize, end quote, while coming in for landing. A fact underscored by the impressive list of what could not have happened in that short time, such as getting lost, missing the island which was in sight, losing its radio, or being affected by any navigational aberrations. Some more unusual circumstances surrounded the disappearance of a Cessna 402C on May 27, 1987. In this case, the plane was clearly seen to pass over its destination of Marsh Harbor, Great Abaco Island, and to continue eastward as if the pilot had never seen his destination below. So strange. This course would take it out into the middle of the Atlantic, as there is nothing beyond Great Abaco. There appeared to be no trouble with the plane, and the large island was clearly visible in the better than average weather. No trace of the aircraft or its pilot was ever found. He sent no distress call of any kind, or that is, none was received. On June 3rd, 1987, a large Cessna 401 disappeared between Freeport, Grand Bahama, and Crooked Island, Bahamas, with 4 persons on board. No trace was found despite broadcasts to be on the lookout for a number of bright orange life jackets carried on board and to listen for an ELT signal. On December 2nd, 1987, Victor Arrubarena disappeared along with his Cessna 152 on a short route between La Romana, Dominican Republic, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. A course that reminds one of Torres and Pagan's tragic flight in 1980. Among those that have vanished on short routes, there is the interesting case of a Cessna 152 during an instructional flight in perfect weather off the east coast of Florida on January 24th, 1990. Although they were always in view of the coastal lights of West Palm Beach, the flight simply vanished without a trace, or a peep over the radio, or from its ELT. Another aircraft lost on a short route was the Cherokee N7207F on June 5th, 1990, between the islands of St. Martin and St. Croix. The last words of the pilot, Mary Pomeroy, were unusually faint, consisting of, quote, 02 Foxtrot, 45, at the boundary, over, end quote, indicating she was entering U.S. airspace. Then she faded away for good. Another unusual disappearance on the radar happened on October 31st, 1991, when a Grumman Cougar jet was being tracked on radar over the Gulf of Mexico. The pilot, John Verdi, had just requested ascent from 23,000 feet to 29,000 feet. Radar tracked the aircraft during its climb until, for some unknown reason, it simply faded away. Radar readouts confirmed the unusual. The jet had not been captured as descending or falling to the sea. While there was convective thunderstorm activity noted in the area, the cloud tops were at 27,000 feet, and the jet was last observed above the weather while on its ascent. So it doesn't say if it passed through the storm or not, but we'll assume it didn't pass through the storm. And it got above 27,000 feet, which were the cloud tops of that thunderstorm. So is it just being in proximity of the thunderstorms, or these artificial thunderstorms, if they're popping up like that, that's causing these anomalies? Or one aspect of them? It seems like a lot of these just pop up out of nowhere, too. The weather. Alright. In the last decade, disappearances of aircraft have been along familiar routes as those before, around Florida or over the Bahamas. On September 30th, 1993, a Cessna 172 disappeared between Miami and Marco Island, near Florida Bay. The pilot was last heard in routine chatter by other planes. The weather was clear, without complications. A Cherokee 6 went missing between Treasure Cay, Bahamas and Fort Pierce, Florida on August 28, 1994. On September 19th, the following month, a Piper twin-engine Aztec disappeared over the Caribbean with 5 persons. And on the following Christmas, another Cherokee disappeared near Florida. Overland, possibly the last being seen fighting power loss while flying over a house. In this last sighting, the pilot never reported a problem. That's such an eerie factor here. Like, also the planes that are flying over their destination. Like, oh no, we're just gonna keep going. They're supposed to communicate if they're doing anything differently. So the radio silence of these planes just going off course and doing something different, it makes you wonder. Who's like guiding these planes if nobody's in them? If they've been disappeared and then reappeared with no pilots, no people aboard, are these planes just drifting away? And then it disappears again and then gets placed under the water? Or gets cloaked and dives under the water? And that way nobody sees the plane? An Aero Commander 500 performed some unexplained maneuvers before it vanished from radar near Nassau on May 12, 1999. The Aero 500 was clocked by Nassau radar as steadily descending. But at no time did the pilot, Enrique Esme, report anything unusual. The radar then registered 000 altitude. And in parentheses, this says this was not an amphibian. So this was not an airplane that could turn into a boat or dive or anything like that. But 30 minutes later, he reappeared, requested to land at Nassau, did unusual maneuvers which angered the controller. Then in parentheses it says, though Esme seemed unaware of them, then climbed to 1,300 feet where the plane completely and finally vanished. So I'm going to say these pilots have no awareness of this even happening to them. They assume they're still on course and their plane's going. But to their vision, like, are they being put into some sort of bubble where all their surroundings are kept the same? And then it's like, all right, let's nosedive the thing. And I'm talking about like a third party that's making these things appear and disappear. That's going without saying that this also could be an energy grid phenomenon. But that could be the case as well, where we have these planes. Like, what in the energy grid would make these planes think they're still on the same course when they're not, and they're angering these traffic control people? They're like, what are you doing? You're going all over the place. A part of an aircraft wing was found in the search, not definitely determined as coming from the plane, though it did have a gold and blue paint, the same color scheme as the charter plane. So once again, this last account, the plane went to 000 altitude. It went straight to the water line. And then 30 minutes later, it reappeared. So I wonder if it disappears off the radar if it goes to 000 altitude. On October 27th, 2000, Hubert Hellegar disappeared after leaving Winter Haven, Florida to cruise locally near the Everglades in a Cessna 150, N11214. It was the only time he left without his GPS or cell phone. Most recently, a Piper has vanished. On September 6th, 2002, while in contact with NASA Control, the pilot of Pawnee N59684 was reporting himself en route to Fort Lauderdale, from Fort Lauderdale to LaCroix. Suddenly, his voice stopped. The radar scope revealed that his, quote, blip, end quote, which had shown he was just 20 miles southeast, was now gone. Throughout the reports, a number of pertinent factors quickly became evident. Each disappearance was very sudden and unexpected. The average qualifications of the pilots ranged from good to excellent, with several hundred to thousands of flight hours experience under their belts. Some figures jump out immediately, like 5,000, 11,000, 15,000, and in one instance, 18,000 flight hours experience. So to be blunt here, these aren't just dumb shits getting into planes with no experience. These are highly experienced pilots that are disappearing in these circumstances. 18,000 hours flight experience. Oh. Engine loss, oil leaks, smoke in the cabin, and fuel exhaustion are all more routine events that have been experienced by any number of pilots and have precipitated terrible accidents. Nevertheless, in such cases, pilots are able to transmit their problems and often ditch the aircraft and survive. One pilot, for instance, set out on a long flight without a functioning radio. Near Caicos Island, he ran out of fuel, but he was still able to use a handheld radio and reached Caicos Tower, informing them he was ditching. He survived. By contrast, with these more routine and familiar hazards that befall aircraft, the disappearing aircraft at best are capable of sending only confusing and sketchy maydays, if any, and still never seem to ditch properly, leave debris, or impact with the ocean and leave an ELT signal, and no occupants ever survive. Thank you for doing the math on that, Texas Learny. Texas Learny says 18,000 flight hours is 450 weeks of 40 hours a week. It's nearly 10 years experience, right? Based off of that timeline. I don't care, I'm hitting my vape. This stuff just continues to boggle my mind here. To belabor the point, there is a disquieting contrast between disasters of known origin and disappearances. For example, in one disaster in 1980, a DC-3, fully loaded with 34 people and flying from Fort Lauderdale to Freeport, Grand Bahama, while coming in for a landing, was struck by lightning and crashed into the sea. Rescuers came upon a veritable debris field of cushions, plywood, life jackets, and numerous bodies. But in the case of DC-3, NC 16002's disappearance in 1948 in excellent weather while on approach to Miami, there was no trace whatsoever. It was the same for the DC-3 N407D in 1978. Also for the Charter Chieftain at St. Thomas in 1978, while only 2 miles or less from the runway. There are dozens of other such disappearances in fair weather that have a comparable opposite number of disasters in bad weather where debris is commonplace. While it is often argued by those who seek to explain away the Bermuda Triangle mysteries that they are nothing more than statistically acceptable accidents, others note that the unusual element seen in many of them is far more important and crucial to any discussion than the number. They point out that an accident is different from a disappearance. The waterways off California and New England, for example, bustle with activity, and the catastrophe, with all its gambols, is frequent. On the other hand, these areas are comparatively low in disappearances. They're talking about California and New England. The dividing factor is, of course, the presence of wreckage. The absence of an SOS may indicate the lightning-like speed with which the aircraft was destroyed. The absence of an ELT signal might also suggest that the force was so destructive that it obliterated the device before it could transmit. I don't know, I want to say it just went to another dimension. Can't have interdimensional communication via radio, apparently, either. So, there's that. But what is so fast and so destructive as to preclude any debris whatsoever? I'd say a portal, right? Or magnetics. I'll be good with explaining it away with the energy grid, magnetics. There's also the idea of miniature black holes all around the area. I don't know. These are things I've heard. It may be perfectly natural to assume that the sea is the primary culprit. You guys remember a few weeks ago when we were talking about mercury in the water? Making sounds that sound like people? Or picking up radio signals in the water? Through the mercury? And there is such thing as naturally forming mercury on the water, in the waterways. So runoff from rivers into the sea. I think we showed this on one of the parts. You see that there's like 5 or 6 chemical reactions that happen from the river to the seabed that turns elements into mercury. So it's not just waste from pollutants and all that. After all, unlike land, the sea can hide the remains of a simple crash or disperse it before rescuers come upon the scene. But this can by no means explain what caused the aircraft to crash in the first place. Nor can the sea always remove the trace of the aircraft in shallow water, a few feet deep, or prevent wreckage from washing up on a beach only 1 mile from the area of suspected impact. It is true that in past centuries, to be 50 or even a few miles from the shore was to be a long distance out at sea. Yeah, that's another thing. You're just a few miles out from shore. You're pretty far away already. The disappearance of a ship and later of a plane did not indicate anything unusual in itself. Often a disappearance went unnoticed until the ship or plane was declared overdue, which could be hours or days later. And long journeys would confront rescuers before arriving at the suspected scene of the accident. But radio and radar coverage and the fast speeds that aircraft traveled, 50 miles being only minutes time-wise, have shrunk the ocean considerably, and thus the amount of time and space it takes for anything unusual to happen doesn't. I know that's it. I'm sorry about that. Continuing disappearances without trace, without mayday, without ELT, even in such narrow corridors as 1 to 5 miles from land, beggar the imagination. The temptation to reject their occurrence would seem easy, were it not for the fact that they have been so well documented and investigated. These aircraft have disappeared in spite of every precaution of flight service, which includes flight plans, in parentheses it says here, a handy file for tower operators to refer to a plane's departure time, course, planned altitude, and estimated time of arrival. That's the end of the parentheses. Which allows a tower operator to declare a flight overdue within minutes of its failure to report itself in the traffic pattern. Several navigational devices that safeguard the pilot from human error, like VOR, parentheses it says very high frequency, omnidirectional range, or just variable omnirange. That's the end of the parentheses. Radio guidance signals sent out from a base station that guide the aircraft to that destination. There's also DME, or distance measuring equipment, that lets the pilot know where he is in relation to various airfields. Transponders that identify an aircraft on the scope so a controller can sort out which blip is the plane that signaled itself in trouble, allowing him to quickly judge its altitude and location and render immediate assistance. Weather radar, carried in the larger commercial aircraft, that detects the immediate weather instead of leaving a pilot dependent on reports from distant stations on what the weather may be like along his course. Rescue operations are aided now by helicopters and hydrofoil cutters that travel at fantastic speed, set into motion by the flight service stations which monitor the frequencies in use. The moment a mayday is received, the Coast Guard is notified. Immediate broadcasts are made to all local traffic to be, quote, on the lookout, end quote. The speeds of the local currents and probable drift are standard computations in any search and rescue operation. But none of these have done away with disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle at all, nor explained why in other oceans the opposite stands true of overwater accidents where debris is still more consistently located, retrieved, and examined. Aircraft accidents happen anywhere in the world with sudden and frightening speed. Airways and seaways over the Mediterranean, around Hawaii, or off Australia are busy with traffic. Yet none have a reputation as a, quote, devil's sea, end quote. Nor, interestingly, have they ever had. But long before the 20th century, the same general area of ocean known today as the Bermuda Triangle was known by other names by virtue of the many sea mysteries that frequented it. Our records of modern missing aircraft are only our generation's contribution to the history of this area, one that unites it with many missing freighters and drifting empty sailboats of the past. A contribution that equally unites us in bewilderment with earlier generations in contemplating an area of ocean that has been an observed mystery for hundreds of years. And with that, we have completed Chapter 2. I said I was going to show you the pictures or the photographs from this book, so I guess we will do that now. Just give me one moment to adjust my radar here. Alright, let's do this. So if you haven't guessed yet, our next chapter for next week is Chapter 3, The Riddle of Vanished Ships. Now, I'm putting these titles in, or these, like, chapter titles in the titles of the videos now. I've removed the deep dive into at the beginning of the titles here. I think it's going to help with getting more viewers here. I'm trying to convey more information as we move along in these series. Like, I'm learning what are the best practices here and how to get this in front of more people. So obviously I want as many people as possible to be seeing these. Okay, so let's start with well, we got quite a bit of photographs. I don't know if I'll even do them justice here showing them like this. I was thinking of scanning these in or taking photographs with the phone and showing them up that way. But these are showing everything that we covered here in the past 3 parts of this deep dive in all Chapter 2. So the first photograph here is the TBM was the largest single-engine aircraft used in World War II. It was designed to carry 3 crew. Pilot, the gunner, and the radioman. This is from the National Archives. Yeah, I'm gonna have to find a better way to show you all these, because they're like smack dab in the middle of the book here. Let's see, can I change this? Alright, that's a little better. Second, here we have an example of an actual Fort Lauderdale-based FT, or Foxterror. The F stood for Fort Lauderdale, T for torpedo. And it's from the National Archives as well. That's this guy right here. There we go. Photograph 3. Some of the drama of Flight 19 played itself out here in Operations Tower, or Operations Radio below the tower. And this is from this author's collection. So Flight 19 was broadcast over here through these radios. It's too bad these aren't full scale and in color. I wouldn't have minded that. Alright, photograph 4. 2 PBM Mariners in flight off Banana River, Florida in 1945. Just as shown, Training 49 and Training 32 took off to scour the Atlantic for Flight 19 on December 5th, 1945. Training 49 would disintegrate, while Training 32 on the right would return safely. This is from the National Archives. Hey Ivy, good to see you in here. We're getting towards the end of today's show, but I wanted to get these photographs in too. So the plane on the left disintegrated, searching for Flight 19. The plane on the right made it back safely. Photograph 4 says, attempts to solve the mystery of Flight 19 have even included concocting false information about its leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, labeling him a drunk, sloppy, and a careless navigator. He was, in reality, an excellent pilot, a light drinker, and a conscientious leader. This is the pilot of Flight 19. Next we have a big C-54. This was the military transport version of the DC-4, the largest airliner of the time. And this is from the author's collection. Right here. Next is the BSAA Tudor 4, a hermetically sealed aircraft. BSAA and BOAC operated Tudors around the Western Hemisphere, but only 2 disappeared, both in the Triangle, causing the plane to be withdrawn from service. Freddie Laker later let him move to reinstate the Tudor 4 as a cargo plane. As the Super Trader, it clocked more than 3 million miles around the world without incident. This photo is courtesy of Joan Beckett from the collection of J.C. McPhee. So that's this plane right here. Two of them disappeared in the Triangle. Next is a photograph of John Clutha McPhee, pilot of Star Aerial, was a highly qualified RAF pilot, a quiet, popular, intellectual type. And this photo is courtesy of his sister, Joan Beckett. Next we have the DC-3 was the standard airliner of its time. The disappearance of NC-16002 in 1948 would be equivalent to the disappearance of an MD-80 today. Thousands of DC-3s were used as military cargo and paratroop planes in World War II. And this is from the author's collection. This one's a little bigger of a photograph here. Let's see how to do this. So another World War II plane. Next, a C-46 Commando. Many such surplus U.S. Air Force aircraft were converted to cargo service after the war. The disappearance of one of these while approaching Miami on December 21st, 1952, is yet another example of inexplicable losses in the Triangle. And this again is from the author's collection. Alright, next, a Lockheed Super Constellation. When a Navy version of this aircraft disappeared in 1954, the Naval Board of Inquiry was only able to deduce that it, quote, did not meet with a violent and unknown force, end quote. A 12-day search found no trace. And this is from the National Archives. So this is a Lockheed Super Constellation aircraft. Right here. Next we have what can explain the disappearance of Pogo 22 during a routine maneuver in 1961. This is from the author's collection. That would be this photograph here. Next, we have the KB-50 was an aerial tanker based on the design of the B-29 bomber. The search for one of these in 1962 is probably the largest search ever conducted for a missing plane. And this is also from the author's collection. It's this one right here. Largest search ever conducted for a missing plane. Next we have a C-133 Cargo Master, the largest USAF plane in service. Two of these vanished from radar near land, full of cargo and fuel, one without trace, the other leaving only a life raft and a nose wheel with an unidentified, quote, magnetic particle, end quote. National Archives is the source. So this is the plane that disappeared and all I did was find a wheel. Like that was all that was left. That's this one right here. Only a wheel found. Next we have a KC-135 Stratotanker. Can the unexplained turbulence and, quote, funnels, end quote, of the Triangle explain the loss of two jets like this in 1963? And again, this is from the author's collection. That would be this photo right here. Next we have a C-119 flying boxcar. The last message from this aircraft was picked up 1,300 miles away from its course. It vanished without trace or reason. And this photo is from the National Archives. That'd be this plane right here. Next we have an ever-reliable, rather bulbous Piper Apache. And this is from the National Archives. This is the bigger photo right up here. A little bit below it is the Comanche. It just says a Comanche, so it's probably not the one that disappeared, but it's this guy right here. These smaller range craft are more susceptible, it seems, but these bigger ones also disappeared, so who knows. Next, we have a standard Piper Cherokee Warrior, and this is from the National Archives. That would be this photograph right here. There we go. Next we have a Beechcraft Musketeer, competitor to the Piper Cherokee. This is from the author's collection. So that's the one right next to this. Right here. Next we have a Beechcraft Executive Queen Air 65. This is from the author's collection. That would be this photograph right by my index finger. Next we have Rockwell's Aero Commander 500 series, a popular heavy twin-engine plane. This is also from the author's collection. This is one on the bottom here. Next we have Rockwell's prototype Aero Commander. It's from the author's collection. That would be this big one up top. Next we have the ever popular Beechcraft V-Tail Bonanza, also from the author's collection. It's photographed right below it right here. Next we have a Cessna Skylane, another popular airplane. It's also from the author's collection. That is this one right here. Next we have a Cessna 310, a rugged light twin, or twin engine. That's from the author's collection as well. And that's the photograph right below the previous one, right here. Next we have a Cessna 210, also from the author's collection, and a Beechcraft Baron, which is also from the author's collection. So these are the last two on the bottom. Cessna 210 is the bigger one on the top here. Okay. We got one more spread of photographs, and then that'll be it for today. So next we have a Beechcraft Travel Air, also from the author's collection. So that'll be up here on the top. Next we have an F4 Phantom II in a right turn. In such a maneuver, Sting 27 vanished from radar. One of the most puzzling cases in the triangle. It left no trace and no automatic alarm. An unidentified, quote, oblong, unquote, shape was seen in the water moments later, which itself then quickly disappeared. That's from the National Archives. As if another craft was accompanying it, which could also be responsible for the disappearances. This fighter jet right there. Next we have Captain John Romero, pilot of the Sting 27, holder of 2 distinguished flying crosses. This is courtesy of John Romero III. I believe the grandson. It's this fine gentleman right here. Next we have the DC-3 is considered one of the most reliable aircraft ever built. Out of the nearly 11,000 DC-3s built in the 1930s and 1940s, hundreds are still in service, many in southern Florida and the Caribbean islands, where the short distances and small airfields make their size ideal. The disappearance of this plane, N407D, in 1978 defies explanation. And this photo is taken by and courtesy of Alexandre Avran. So that's this photograph right here. Next we have, even more inexplicable was the disappearance of a Navajo chieftain on November 3rd, 1978, less than 2 miles from the airport and while under visual supervision for landing. And this is from the National Archives. It's this guy right here. Next, we have one of the few disappearances with any clue to what was happening. Jose Pagan, shown here, and his friend vanished in this plane. N3808H on June 28th, 1980, after a desperate mayday describing a, quote, weird object, end quote. And this photo is courtesy of Evelyn Rivera. So that's, yeah, that's the first photograph here. It's hard because this is already quite far in the book, so can't really spread this out that well. Alright. Next, what can explain the bizarre disappearance of the charter Cessna 402 over the Gulf Stream in March 1984 and the ghost image of another aircraft crashing off Bimini at the same time? Did a mirage cast an image of its final moments to the shallows off Bimini? That's very interesting to know. This is from the National Archives. Right up here. That one fascinates me. How you have a possible ghost mirage or something of a... I want to say it was something cloaked that went down. Because why would the crash be duplicated? Alright, next we have what overwhelmed an A-6 attack bomber while approaching the carrier. It happened so fast there was no time for the pilots to eject. And this is from the author's collection. That'll be this photograph right here in the center. Next we have, on July 10th of 1945, a PBM on patrol over the Bahamas disappeared. Tom Garner, shown here, was one of the gunners. The many aircraft disappearances before Flight 19 are emerging from the records today. Left is a standard Navy telegram informing Garner's family, courtesy of Don Garner. So I'll show a photograph of this gentleman here. So he disappeared. There's a report of his disappearance to his family. We got two more photographs. One is a number of Venturas went missing during World War II while on routine anti-sub patrols or search missions. This is from the author's collection. That would be this photograph right here. There we go. And finally, we have a big privateer vanished on July 18th, 1945. And that is this bottom photograph right here. So that concludes chapter 2 of this series. Thank you all for being here. So next week will be the last week before I go on hiatus for a bit here. But we will start chapter 3. We're going to start talking about the vanished ships. But again, this is a 30-page chapter, so we're going to break it into, I believe, 3 different parts. Yeah, 51 to 82. There's a slight chance we can do this in 2 parts with 15 pages each, but I'd rather it be 3 parts, just so we could absorb the material here. But next week will be part 17. And then July 10th will not be a show, as I will be on vacation. And the same for the following week on July 17th. So even though there's 5 weeks in July this year, I'll probably be doing shows for 3 of those weeks. But next week will be the last consistent show for this portion of everything. Once I get back, we'll get back into doing these weekly. And, I'll consider doing these possibly twice in a week. I'll just see how this all goes. But I really do appreciate y'all being here. And for Saturday, we have our final deep dive part for part 15 of the Chicago film industry. And we have episode 12 of Let's Talk on Sunday. Both of those are at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, so be sure to check those out. But other than that, I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday. Thanks again for being here. Remember to like and comment on the video. It helps me out here more than a lot of you know. But I thank you all. And until the next one, class dismissed.